Hey everybody, this is Samantha here, and I'm hosting on behalf of Kathleen for A Great Good Place for Books. And we are really excited to welcome Diana Helmuth, and I'm so glad that I checked out your website, so I pronounced your name correctly.
Great.
Who is the hilariously funny author of How to Suffer Outside, a beginner's guide to hiking and backpacking. I have not read the whole book, but I've been dipping in and out of it throughout the day, and it's just really funny and really great and filled with real information. I mean, I'm so excited about this book, and it does inspire me to get outside and suffer a little bit outside. And with us tonight is Joanna Robinson, who is a writer for Vanity Fair, writes on TV and film, and is also a podcaster. And I learned that one of the connections, maybe it's not the only one, but one of the connections between the two of you is you worked together on a podcast called The Storm, which I don't know much about, but I'm now intrigued, and I've put it on my little list of things to check out. So we're just really delighted. Thank you both so much for taking the time tonight to talk with each other. And I'll let everyone know who's joined us. Please put questions in the chat, and Joanna's going to track those as the conversation goes on. And I'll just let you two take it away. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you to the store for having us. We're so happy to be here. I'm going to give a tiny little preamble before I start peppering Diana with questions. I just want to premise it this way. I don't hike. I have hiked. I have backpacked. But for the most part, I'm an indoor cat. That's what I am. One time I got a really nasty blister just like walking around Austin, Texas, and Diana saved me by producing a roll of medical tape from I don't know where and just like fixed me up. She just had it. So when she told me that she was writing a backpacking book, I was so proud of her. But I was a little scared too, because she was like, now I have to write a backpacking book. And I was like, now I have to read a backpacking book. Like, I'm not a backpacker. I don't know what, but here's the thing about Diana. She's one of the funniest people I have ever met in my life. So I was extremely relieved when I sat down, read this beautiful book, that it was just like having a conversation with my hilarious, well-informed friend. There was no pain point for me. Your voice just leaps off the page, Diana. You're so amazing at what you've done and what you've accomplished here. So here's the thing about Diana. If she's out of town, she's probably hiking or camping or camping and hiking simultaneously, aka backpacking. Some people drink, some people do serial dating. Diana hikes. And she's funny, but she's experienced and she's practical. And reading this book made me feel like maybe even I could do this, which is no mean feat, Diana. So here she is, Gower of eBay deals. Mother of purification water science projects. Diana Helmuth, hello.
Thank you. That was I don't think my ego is going to recover from that for a full week from that intro. Thank you very much. And the medical tape, I never leave home without it. Also because I've gotten blisters in just walking through cities. I think it just has to do with maybe having unusually sized feet in my particular case, but I never leave home without it. Yeah.
Something that I want to bring you thudding down to earth by asking you this first question. Then let me cut you down to size and say,
awesome.
When did you know you had to write a chapter titled Poop? And at any point in writing that chapter, did you have any regrets about writing a whole chapter dedicated to this?
That's a fantastic question. I think because I was very fortunate to go to a high school where they had this special program called Team, where they took 24 kids from across the school district and kind of threw them together. You had to interview, but it was free. It was just something really magical that happened in Marin, which is, granted a very wealthy county. But they took us on 3 backpacking trips, taught us wilderness medicine. It was sort of how I got started. And I write about Team a lot in the book. I think it's a really fascinating program. I'd like to write an entire book on that. But anyway, at that point in our lives, most of the kids, we were all 16, nobody had pooped outside. And there was actually a ton of fear around it, and people were really nervous and really worried because we're talking about like American middle class kids. You're raised from the diaper to the porcelain throne. There's no middle ground. No one had really traveled internationally at that point. We didn't know that there were other ways to go to the bathroom, and our teachers had to be like, listen, you're gonna dig a hole and then you're gonna poop in the hole. And a lot of us were like, I don't really think that's not gonna happen. That's not gonna happen. And then our teacher was like, the thing is, if it doesn't happen, you might have to go to the hospital, or we might have to get it out of your body, which is the most, if you can give your teacher a medical reason to stick a finger up your butt, like that's more horrifying than, yeah, exactly, more horrifying than anything else you could think of. So I tried to remember, like when I was thinking about just starting backpacking, I thought about all the stuff that was told to me that I appreciated or that I wish had been told to me. And in the poop chapter, this was a case where it's just unavoidable. And I think not a lot of books tackle it. There is one, I think there's a book called How to Shit in the Woods, which is brilliant. And I'm forgetting the author. I saw it just the other day at REI. But aside from that book, I think most backpackers just kind of people just don't really want to talk about it. But it's so important because everybody shits, as Trevor Noah once said. It is just a universal constant, and you have to figure out how to do it. And I think it's the one part of backpacking that is extremely unglamorous, but so critical. So I just kind of wanted to step right out and be like, let's just talk about this. Let's just get over it. Let's get through it. Let's talk about how to do this in a way that is somewhat elegant and civilized. Yeah, so that's, I think that answers the question, I hope. But
and then some, honestly.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, as indicated by that chapter, this is not your mother's backpacking book, right? Like this is something really, really different, and it demystifies a lot of things. It breaks things down. It makes things really approachable. So my question to you is, as you approach this, like, who is your target audience? What problem are you trying to solve in writing this book in the way that you put this information together?
Yeah, I have started thinking of this book as a permission slip to be not perfect, to be a little messy, to be not Bear Grylls, not Cheryl Strayed, not someone who can take 6 months off, not someone who is a wilderness survival master, but someone who wants to go backpacking, wants to get more in touch with nature, wants to challenge themselves a little bit. But at the same time, they're like, I feel like a lot of the media out there around backpacking and being in the wild is it's all very extreme. It's very, you have the time to go find yourself for 6 months and go on a hero's journey. You have spent 10 years studying with, I don't know, like tribes in Northern Africa, it always seems to be with these guys. I wanted to just kind of dispel that myth and be like, it's okay. You can sort of just be like a chubby admin assistant who eats a lot of cake and has a bunion and go and have this profound experience. And by the way, your experience is just as profound, even though you're not doing a hero's quest and you're not a professional wilderness tracker. So that is what I wanted the book to be. Like, your journey is valid. You don't have to be an expert yet. It's good enough. It's fine. Come on, let's just go. Because that has been my approach throughout every backpacking trip I've been on, and like, I'm still alive. So yeah, I wanted it to be like an affirmation that it's okay if you don't think you're going to have everything right. Just do it anyway. Let's just get the basics down so you don't die, and then everything else is like, you'll be fine. Just come on, it's fine. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. I know that you came to this book with a lot of knowledge based on your years of experience, but I also watched you do a lot of research for this book, and I'm curious, in the process of putting this book together, did you learn anything about backpacking in general that surprised you, that challenged an idea you already had about this experience, something that moved while you put this book together?
Right. I mean, I learned a lot more about water filters and water purification than I knew originally. I did. I knew for some reason we had used iodine to purify our water in high school, and then no one did that anymore. And I didn't know why.
Yeah.
And at first I thought it was because the type of iodine we used, everyone was buying to make meth with. So they had to take it off the market. And I thought it was just that. And then turns out, no, I guess during the time, you know, between high school and the past couple of years, it used to just be Giardia was the main protozoa that they were worried about in the backcountry. And then cryptosporidium became a big issue. And frankly, I had no clue because this whole time I had been using iodine. So during the writing of this book, I quietly switched to a different water purification system. And I'm glad I didn't get cryptosporidium. And I was able to write about that. Like, you know, not all of these water purification systems are the same. And I think actually every few years, something comes out where they realize the science has changed, or we've discovered this new protozoa in the water that your previous water purification system doesn't actually fix, so you need a new one, and da-da-da. But I definitely did learn a lot while writing the book. Not all of it is just anecdotal and, you know, my own expert wisdom. I don't even consider myself an expert still. Every time I go out, I am humbled by something and I learn something new every single time. And I think that's just true, period. And I think if anyone is pretending otherwise, they're full of it. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that, like, you mention, you know, just go out and do it, right? Just do it. Don't, here are your tips to not die, but like, just do it. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. And a
Yeah.
lot of what you write about in this book, you mention all these sort of ideals of, you know, ultralight backpackers, or people who are mega fit and this is what they do all the time, or, you know, these idealized versions. And it's the version that we see in like an REI catalog and feel maybe intimidated, like we don't belong out there. But something that I've seen you also do recently, in conjunction with this book, is start this incredible TikTok account where you're just like out there doing your thing, and we get to see you sort of like huffing and puffing. And you're not the only one, right? Like, that there's a lot of people out there who are like, hey, I love to do this too. Like, the outdoors belongs to me as well. So I'm wondering if, like, in general, you think this rise of social media influencers who are not about the perfect gram at the top of the pinnacle, which is fine. Like, we love the
We love that
perfect shot at the
beautiful
top
shot
of the mountain, right?
Yeah.
But also the blood, sweat, and tears of getting to the top of that mountain in the first place. How do you see social media fitting into this larger sort of messaging?
That's a good question. So I do a lot of bashing of Instagram in the book, specifically Instagram, because I think Instagram has given us a picture of backpacking that is kind of false, where everyone is like beautiful and has clean hair and looks like they smell good and is on top of a cliff in their little like victory pose. And that is 99% of the time not what's going on at all. And not to, I mean, I am not sponsored by TikTok, although if they're listening, you know, I'm available. But the thing I like about TikTok is that the tone of it seems to be a little bit more about presenting authentic reality. Even if it's like a fake presentation of authentic reality, the point is people want to see something a little gritty. And I've seen, I mean, Jenny Brusso, an Unlikely Hikers, to her credit, is on Instagram being like, hey, we look different. We're not your typical hiker, and we're out here and we're having a good time. And I think she kind of probably started that trend, or at least was one of the first few people. But there's a lot of folks on TikTok, Abby Normal Adventures, Hiker Sized. There's a third one I'm forgetting that she's great, that show like suffering. They show huffing and puffing. And I think especially showing huffing and puffing is such, it is like a balm on the wound that is this idea that you can't go outside because you are not at your goal weight, or you are not extraordinarily fit. I mean, you do need to have a certain amount of physical ability, right? Like, you need to be able to walk for a long time. And, you know, I don't want to pretend that those challenges don't exist, but at the same time, I really like that people are just showing more gritty reality. Like, we're all ready to hear the truth now, that this isn't fun all the time, and it's not easy all the time, and it's type 2 fun, and type 2 fun means it sucks first, and we want to see the part that sucks first. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I went off on a kind of a side
No,
tangent
that's
there,
perfect. I love that. And I mean, it leads me into this other thing I want to ask you about, which is this idea of you talk about this, you touch on this a few times in the book, this idea of really listening to your body when your body is telling you this doesn't feel right, this is my limit, these are the wrong shoes, whatever the case may be, you know, like you really have to listen to your body. And that can be so challenging for so many of us who want to sort of push through and pretend like we're not in pain and pretend like we don't have limits, especially if we feel like our limits don't match the person we're with. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about like your own journey through like listening to your body when it tells you about certain things.
Yeah, I've experienced that a lot outside. I mean, it's especially what you're referencing, the thing with the shoes. I took these shoes to Torres del Paine in Chile, and I was so excited to backpack. It was a dream come true. I spent a bunch of money. I took a bunch of time off work, and I got there, and the shoes I was wearing were slightly too small, and it ruined my entire trip. I ended up with Achilles tendonitis. I had to hike out because it's not the kind of emergency where you want to get a lift from a helicopter. But I ended up with a screwed up Achilles tendon for like a year afterwards from that mistake, which was kind of a nice reminder because I thought, and it sounds dumb when you say it, but I think especially women growing up in our society, when you put on a piece of clothing and it doesn't fit, you assume something's wrong with you, and you just kind of grit your teeth and you bear it. And I did that with my hiking boots, but my hiking boots were like, yeah, the thing is, these aren't like your office flats. We're like married now for the next week, so I'm just gonna keep hurting you.
Yeah.
And I think that there are moments on the trail where you are forced to have radical self-acceptance, where you're like, but I want to hike 20 miles a day because Carrot Quinn hikes 20 miles a day. And if she can do it, I can do it. And you have to realize, no, you can't. But then you keep going. That's the cool part. And then you realize you're still fine and you're still having a great time, even though you're not this person you look up to and the shoes don't fit and you've completely hurt yourself. I do think backpacking is a very, very, very short road to radical self-acceptance for a variety of reasons, but especially around just like, you were going to get so up in your body. Your body is going to let you know about so much stuff that you just can't avoid, and you have to accept it, or you kind of have to just like give up or die. So you usually end up accepting it. Which is great.
That's a preferable result there. Yeah,
yes,
okay,
that's a preferable result.
One of my favorite parts about that shoe story in the book is you talk about the various people that you meet on the trail who helped you sort of through this moment. And it's not the only instance in the book where you talk about this sort of incredible generosity that happens on the trail. I love learning about these bins that are on these long trails like the PCH, et cetera, where you know, lost and found hiking gear is just in these bins in case another hiker comes along and needs something, needs a tent, you know, needs a pole, needs a whatever. So what, you know, what are your thoughts on that community and that sense of generosity, which is not something we always feel like we encounter here in what I think of as the real world, but out there in the mystical trails and backcountry, there seems to be this like incredible swell of human spirit. Sort of, what do you think the source of that is? What do you think?
I think it's backpackers are, I think, the nicest group of people to each other. Like I'm not, I mean, I don't think I'm the meanest person in the world, but I am like not super nice in normal society. I don't know, I'm probably average, but on the trail, I've like literally given someone my pants, and I've had someone literally give me a water filter. I think it's this like kind of magical, our enemy is no longer each other. Our enemy is, I mean, I hate saying it like this, our enemy is nature. It's not true. But the point is, we're all trying to get through something. We all have a common goal. And it's like this, that takes over everything else. I don't really know why, but yeah, some kind of community kicks in where I think we all just realize we have a more common enemy, for lack of a better word. I hate referring to nature as an enemy because it's not how I feel about it, but we have a common thing we're fighting. We have a common thing that we are getting through. We have a common hero's journey. And so we empathize deeply and just help each other out without question. And it is really cool. I don't really know exactly why it happens, but it is very magical. I think backpackers are also always really eager to share and help out, and like sometimes a little over the top. Oh, let me show you how that works. You're like, I'm fine, you know, but they're just really eager. But I think most people come from a really, really good place and want to help you. Backpackers are the nicest people on earth, generally speaking.
I think it's hilarious that you thought you could just blaze through that story of the time you gave your pants to someone. Can you tell me a little bit more about that story?
Well, so I was someone. It was Justin, who you know, who's my partner, who's in the book. He loses his toenails. But on that trip, we had to hike over a log, and his pants just ripped just all the way down. And we just kind of stared at each other. And I was like, well, I have my leggings. Do you have other pants? And he was like, I do not. I was like, okay. So I just took my pants off and gave them to him. I wasn't like, let's fix your pants with duct tape, or or just deal with it, because we were about to hike through a field of poison oak. This trip that I took, by the way, a lot of stories from it are in the book because I just messed so many things up. And I learned so much on this trip. And we had to hike through like literally an entire mile of poison oak and really test how allergic we were. But the idea of making him walk through that without pants was just like, we couldn't do it. So so I took my pants off, and they fit. And I put on my log underwear that I was supposed to also be sleeping in. But the point is, I had another pair of pants and he didn't, so he got the pants. That was just what had to happen. Yeah.
One of the folks who's here for the chat, Madison, suggests that instead of calling the outdoors the great adversary, you could call it like injury. Injury is a common adversary. We're all trying to avoid injury, right? And that's just a reminder to folks, if you have a question for Diana, you can pop it in the chat and I will slide it in here. You know, she's used to me peppering her with questions. So if you want to challenge her, go right ahead. And so let's go with this other question that I have for you here, though, which is a really interesting part of the book, which is about the concept of leave no trace, which is this big part of the ethos of hiking and backpacking, this sort of agreement to preserve the wonder and splendor that you're trying to go see. Can you talk a little bit about, I don't know, your process through learning about the idea of leave no trace and what it means to folks who might not know?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this, because leave no trace is something I really get like actually very angry about. Because people don't follow it because they're careless or they think it's gross. Basically, leave no trace is like, if you've ever gone camping or gotten a permit to hike somewhere, I mean, usually the ranger station has those words up. There is a leave no trace foundation, and the idea is that when you go into nature, you know, take only photos, leave only footprints. Because I think at this point, when you're in nature and you feel like you're in an area that is totally unspoiled, and you're having your Instagram moment when you're on top of the mountain and the temperature's just right and the mosquitoes aren't out yet, and you're really just like, wow, everything's perfect and I did this. That moment is a gift that has been given to you by thousands of other hikers who have packed out their trash, not pooped next to a stream, been careful about where they put their campsites. They are like, we are giving each other the illusion that you are all alone with nature, because you make a point not to leave your trash anywhere, and you're careful about where you go to the bathroom. And the reason I get mad about it is because I think a lot of people don't like to follow aspects of leave no trace because they think it's gross. Like, they don't want to pack out their toilet paper, or they're just kind of thoughtless about their trash, or they drop a wrapper and they think, oh, but it's the only one out here, so who cares? And they just keep walking. And someone else will stumble into that, and it breaks the illusion. It breaks the gift of the illusion that we're all giving to each other. And especially in the case of toilet paper, like, I was just in Inyo National Forest, in the Ansel Adams Wilderness, and I saw some people not pack out their toilet paper, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, oh, it's gross. You don't want to pack it out. It's gross. So I can run into it because I won't think it's gross. Are you serious? It's just, it's so entitled. It's so selfish and it makes me so mad. So I write about it a lot in the book because I want to acknowledge that packing out your trash is hard. Packing out your trash can be disgusting and you need to do it anyway because someone did it for you. And so you need to do it for someone else. That's, we're paying it forward. That's the rule. Yeah.
That sort of that anecdote of witnessing some folks borrowing that dovetails in a question we have from Aaron, who wants to know some of the different parts of the world where you have gone hiking and if you've noticed a difference between hikers in different parts of the country, or I know you've hiked globally, so around the world.
That's interesting. So in Germany and Austria, I saw no toilet paper. And I think that's because they have huts, which is wonderful. Like you hike all day and then you hike to this little house that's warm and you eat like hot potatoes and beef and tea and beer. And then you sleep in a bed and then you get up in the morning and you hike again. And it's like, oh my God, it's the best. It's glam packing because you're not really backpacking. But I think that's great. And I think part of the reason they did that, even though some people might turn up their nose at it and say, well, that's not truly roughing it. And I'm like, well, on the other hand, the landscape is unspoiled because people aren't forced to do the things that generate trash. I think in America, if there's a lot of people there, there's gonna be some trash and it's just depressing. Like the only indicator is how many people tend to go there, is a reliable indicator of how much trash you will see and how much toilet paper you will see. And of course, the most beautiful places are often the most impacted, and that's kind of the trade-off. You want to see something really, really, really beautiful, you're either going to have to stab someone for a permit or see a lot of people there. I don't know of any truly spectacular places that I've ever had to myself that I didn't have to fight for in terms of getting a permit or sharing with other people. If anyone has one, I mean, that's the thing. And then sometimes
you don't share, right?
They don't, you
don't tell.
You don't tell anybody where it is. You don't tell anybody. Which is maybe the one time backpackers are not so nice to each other. You never share your secret spots. Yeah.
Well, speaking of like fighting for a permit, you touched on this earlier, this idea of accessibility, that like there are ways in which you want to say anyone can do this, but there are also ways in which privilege comes into this idea of being able to hike, being able to backpack. And I'm wondering, what would you like to see, like in what ways would you like to see the outdoor industry or the outdoor community be more welcoming of people who have historically been left out of this experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's the first privilege barrier, I think, is that you can take a week off at all, which not everybody can, right? Some people can take a weekend, but not everyone can take a week. And for those who can perhaps take a week, there's the issue of how much money do I have to spend on a permit or an entrance fee? Like Yosemite is a perfect example. It's getting really expensive to go to Yosemite because it's like, they keep raising the price on the entrance fee, and the permits to be able to hike out of Yosemite, to do the John Muir Trail, to do the Pacific Crest Trail, it's not so much that they are expensive, but you have to basically get up at 8 a.m. 6 months precisely before you know when you need to start. So you need to know where you're going to be in 6 months, and then click that you want a permit. But they're having this issue where most of the permits are sold out within 2 minutes of them going on sale. I think that the permits themselves are something like $15 a person. I mean, even then, I think because national parks and national forests are national, they are theoretically for every single person in the United States. Excuse me. I think it would be nice for them to have some kind of like, hey, if you're broke, tell us and we'll give you some kind of like credit back, like what they do with healthcare. But the bigger issue around technology, especially in the sense of, I'm not sure where we're at in terms of computer access in the United States, I think we're at like 80 to 90%, or internet access, but even then I don't know, because a lot of these permits are being done only online now. Bots are taking over. So the techies, and like, I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I currently work at a tech company as my day job. I'm allowed to bash, but a lot of engineers are really into the outdoors, and they build bots that snag permits for themselves and their friends. And I think this is a huge problem. And I think I wrote an article on this a couple of years ago, and I actually had someone from recreation.gov reach out to me and go like, oh my God, call us next time. We'll give you an interview. And I was like, I tried to call you. You guys are getting hacked all the time and you're not doing anything about it. So I'm of two minds about this. On the one hand, I think the people who program the bots are terrible, and they should be ashamed of themselves because they're limiting access for people who can't go because they don't have the ability to write a bot. And on the other hand, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. So I think we should just let everyone have a bot and make the bots free, make the bots for everybody. You can program your own bot, just so everyone has access to this technology. I think a lot of people still don't know about the bots, but that's the reason you can't go to Yosemite every summer. It's because some fucking techie in San Jose wrote a bot. That's it. Like, that's honestly the reason.
Well, while we figure out how to burn down the system from the inside, Bronwyn in the chat is here to show me up and remind me of the basics of doing a Q&A. So let me start with a basic question that I forgot to ask you from Bronwyn, which is, what got you started with hiking and backpacking, and what made you fall in love with hiking and backpacking?
Yeah, thanks, Bronwyn. This is gonna sound cheesy, but my mom, I think a neighbor of ours, she might even be here, I'm not sure. Mom, I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong, but I think our neighbor, when I was a kid, got her into hiking and backpacking. She was always pretty athletic growing up, but I think she really got into hiking because of our neighbor, Mary. God, I hope I'm getting this right. And then growing up, she would go hiking all the time. And sometimes she would just kind of like throw me in the car with the Nalgene and the fanny pack, and I would go with her. And I don't know why I liked it. I don't think I really liked it at first, but you know, she would always say, there's a surprise at the top of the mountain. And I'm thinking it's a Slurpee, and it's not, it's like a sunset. And we get to the top and she's like, that's your reward. And she's looking out over the ocean and there's this beautiful sunset. And I'm like, I thought there was cupcakes up here. I like would get mad about it. But then as I got older, I don't know, I think, you know, when you're a teenager, everything's hard. You're feeling everything so strong. You're overstimulated all the time. And I knew that there was this thing I could do to not be tempted by my phone, not be tempted to hear other voices. I could just go away and like listen to the wind, you know? So I hiked through high school to kind of just be with my own thoughts a little bit. And then of course, team inspired my love of backpacking. So this love was not, I wasn't born with it. It was definitely given to me by a lot of people to whom I'm extremely grateful. The teachers of team, my mom, like everyone I went to team with, all the guides, like, yeah, but that's kind of how it all got started. It's just a space to be quiet and unplug. And I know how trite that sounds, but it's true. And I think that's why I tried to write the book as accessibly as possible, because I think especially more than ever, everybody wants a space to unplug. And I don't want people to think they need to be Bear Grylls or Cheryl Strayed in order to go do that. Like, you don't, it's okay. You can go well before you're at that level. It's absolutely fine. I'm not there and I still go all the time. So yeah.
I love this vision of your mom, of Cindy throwing in like homemade trail mix, check, Nalgene, check, my youngest daughter, check. It's all in the car and hitting the trail. You talk about wanting to unplug, like the noisiness of the world, right? And it's interesting to me. I witnessed you literally leave the state in your desperation to go hiking during a point in the pandemic, because a lot of us were sort of penned up inside, drowning in like our tech addiction, and really I know a lot of people took refuge out on trails
Yeah,
because it's something you could do socially distanced, responsibly,
yeah,
safely in this pandemic.
yeah.
I'm wondering how that practice of hiking and backpacking helped you through the last year and a half.
Um, I mean, it massively. I mean, I think to your point, I think it helped a lot of people. There's been a huge spike in the number of people who want to go camping and want to go hiking and backpacking. Permits are more sold out than ever. Campground reservations are more sold out than ever because I think people realize this was the only safe way to recreate because you're outside breathing fresh air, except of course if you're in California in the fall of 2020 and everything is on fire, which is why I went like I called Joanna and I asked her, like, am I nuts if I leave the state to hike? And you were extremely supportive. You were like, you should just go. You should just go. You only live once. And I was like, but this just feels crazy. But California was, I mean, all of California was on fire. It was so depressing. But oh, I went on a tangent. I'm sorry. What was your actual?
No, and how hiking and backpacking helped you through the pandemic?
Oh yeah, yeah.
If you want to, yeah.
Right. I mean, I think it has helped a lot of people, and I think it. Of course, we escaped into our digital communities and our phones to stay sane. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with technology. Technology. I think I used to be more of a Luddite until I realized how much like nylon and plastic is actually involved in backpacking, and I'm so grateful for it. You know, there's a huge difference between survivalists and backpackers. Survivalists are like, I can build a log cabin and my own axe beforehand, and backpackers are like, I have macaroni in a Ziploc bag. But it's I think both experiences are valid. It kept me from. I mean, I think, you know, I think we all know how we feel when we've been staring at a computer screen all day. And by the way, everyone who's here and may have been staring in front of a computer screen all day because of their day job, and the fact that you're here doing it again just to see us, I'm super grateful. It makes me feel a little mental to stare at a screen all day. And going outside was like, oh, right. I have a body. I'm a mortal human. I'm alive. And there's all this stuff out here that's kind of pretty, that isn't technology, that has been hanging out with my ancestors for a lot more time. And maybe if I just sit here with it a little longer, I won't feel so completely disconnected from myself. That's my experience anyway. It's grounding, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
You mentioned macaroni in a bag. My question for you, Diana Helmuth, is what's the weirdest backpacking meal you'll admit to eating?
I mean, you can put anything in macaroni, like dried chili. You can mix soup powder with it. I think probably a funnier story, and I do talk about this in the book, is I was hiking with Jeannie, who's a friend of mine who's in the book a lot. We were doing the Lost Coast Trail in Northern California, which you start on a beach. And I don't know, we went shopping the night before, and it's NorCal and everything's very rustic. And we were just totally swept up in the farm to table joie de vivre of it all. And we got this block of Dubliner Irish cheddar to take on the trail, because that seemed like a good idea. And it's in my pack, and we're hiking. And then that night, or I think I stopped to get some water, and I looked at my pack and it looked like something had leaked inside of it. And I was like, what is going on? So I undid my pack and I realized it was, the cheese was just completely melting all over everything. My sleeping bag, my tent, just everything. Mm. So that night I just took the whole block, like 8 ounces of cheese, and I put it in the macaroni. And I just looked at Jeannie and I was like, this is not going back in my pack. A bear will eat me alive in broad daylight. Like I can't do this. It was the best thing I'd ever eaten, but also we were just so sick because it was way too much. It was just too heavy. But yeah, that might be the weirdest thing that has happened. There might be something else that I'm just repressing, But the point is, don't bring really good bougie cheese. Like cheese sticks, which are contained and have lots of preservatives in them, are wonderful. But just like, you're going back to the land, but you're not eating back to the land. You're actually eating extra processed, because that's the only way your food won't spoil. Yeah, it's one of the great mysteries of backpacking.
Erin has a question for you in our chat, and I know the answer is yes, so I'm going to ask you to pick your favorite, which is, Erin wants to know if you've ever had any dangerous situations arise while hiking, and I know the answer is yes, so like, what is the story you want to regale us with right now?
You know the answer is yes. Do you know the one? Because I'm kind of blanking. I mean, no. Okay.
Do you not feel like you've ever been in danger?
No, I mean, oh, yeah. I did get lost on an active volcano for 3 days once. Yeah.
That's something you just forgot. Okay, tell us that story, please, Diana.
Well, I'm thinking about the worst time I ever had, and honestly, it's probably the time I messed up my shoes, which is kind of funny because people are like, oh, you're going into the wild, all this crazy, dangerous stuff might happen to you. And I'm like, I've never challenged a bear, but I was in a lot of pain because my shoes were too small. Like that's actually the worst thing, because I was just in constant pain that I couldn't turn off. There was no amount of drugs. It was like awful. We did get lost on a volcano called Puyehue in Chile. No one else was there. It was like a complete vertical the whole way up. The first day I thought I was going to kill Jeannie, and then the next day we were hiking around. It was very beautiful. We're above the tree line. It's like this Martian landscapes of rocks, and you're above the clouds. I mean, it was totally magical. And then the trail just kind of stopped. We couldn't find it anymore. We kept pulling out our map and trying to figure out where we were, and we thought we knew where we were, and then a bunch of fog came in and we were totally blinded. And I grew up in fog, but this was like a whole other thing. This was like some mystical never-ending story. The nothing shit came in and we're like blind. And then we made the decision to walk down off of where we thought the trail was, which is still a decision that I do not agree with, but that's the decision we made collectively. It was 2 versus 1. And then for 3 days we couldn't find the trail. But we had water. We found a river. So we stayed near the river. And, you know, the whole time we were out there, I heard this voice in my head, my mom's voice, saying, if you're ever lost in the woods, find water. You don't need shelter. You don't need food. You need water. Find water. Always find water. So as soon as we found the water, it was like, I mean, I like fell on my knees. I felt very pagan. I was like, oh, goddess of the river, thank you for saving our lives. And then we never were able to find the trail. To make a long story short, we were able to figure out where we were based on some frozen lava flows and the top of the cone and like the sun. I often joke that you don't really need a compass because I've never used one. This might have been time for one, but whatever, we're not going to talk about that. We ended up taking this road out that we found on the second day that we were told not to take by the woman who sold us the map, but we were like, we don't have a choice anymore. So we took it. We hiked for some unfathomable number of miles. I've never hiked that long in my life, but we were out of food, so we didn't have a choice. We got to the bottom. It was a farm, and we felt like we were saved. And there were these guys there, and they were like, you can't be here. And we were like, we agree. How do we leave? And they were like, you have to go back up the mountain. And we were like, that is not gonna happen. And like, we thought we were these heroes, and they were just like these dumb white girls. Oh my God, what the fuck are they doing here? Eventually, Irina, who was actually from Chile and spoke fluent Spanish, convinced them to give us a ride to the road. And they gave us a ride to the road. And later she was like, that was the ex-dictator's land. They were very mad that we were there. We didn't ask any questions. We ended up finding our way back to our campground. And that was probably the most interesting thing that has happened to me while backpacking. The park ranger had sold us an outdated map, is what had happened. The volcano had erupted a few years ago, and the trail we were looking for no longer existed due to a lava flow. So it wasn't our fault, but I don't know, when Jeannie tells this story, she's like, we were fine the whole time, Diana, it's just being dramatic. But you know, anyway, I was very scared.
I genuinely, like, if that ever happened to me, which it won't because I don't go outside, but if it did ever happen to me, that would be my whole book. I like how you couldn't remember that anecdote at first. You're like, oh yeah, about that time we got lost in a volcano, encountered some we were on the ex-dictator's land.
Yeah.
What other than your ability to suppress volcano anecdotes, what was the hardest thing you had to sort of confront, either about yourself or about your own experiences as you were writing this book?
I think I really had to, I mean, my whole life, so like I'm kind of chubby, you know, my BMI is technically obese. I am not the body people think of when they think of an athlete, but I do this thing that people think of being as only reserved for athletes. And again, I mean, other people out there are shattering this stereotype, and I'm proud to be in their company. But as I was writing it, I really had to face that, like, because I think I still was hanging on to a lot of embarrassment that I couldn't hike 20 miles a day. And that I wasn't as fleet-footed as someone who is, you know, 120 pounds and can just kind of float over the rocks and never gets altitude sickness. And that it was still okay, and I was still worthy, and I was still worthy to write this book. It was a real test of how much I believed my own shit, basically. Yeah. Like, can I drink my own Kool-Aid? Because it is an unusual Kool-Aid. And I think at the end of it, yes. But I mean, even just this last trip, we had a day where we hiked 10 miles. And at the end of it, I was so tired. And instead of allowing myself to be proud, one of the first thoughts that entered my head was, other people do 20 miles and they don't feel this tired. And then immediately I was like, well, good for them, genuinely. But the point is, I did this and it was hard, and I'm still going to be proud of me. And it was like, I made a point to stop and just thank my body for getting me there instead of being mad at it for not being better. And it actually was really like, that's one of those moments in backpacking where radical self-acceptance becomes not really a choice, but it's something you have to do. And it was nice. It was nice. I think it was very healing. Yeah.
Like I said before, I get to do this all the time with Diana. I get to ask her questions all the time. But we are quickly running out of time for you, anyone in the chat who wants to ask questions. So I will do one last call for questions in the chat while I ask you another question, and then we're gonna wrap it all up. One of the things that I really love that you talk about in the book is, I guess, this idea of it being an adventure, not a contest. And you just sort of touched on this, not comparing yourself to the person who can hike 20 miles a day, right? I can hike 10 miles a day and good for me. I guess, what is the biggest piece of advice you would give to someone who is scared to go hiking or go backpacking, other than read my book, buy my book from A Great Good Place for Books? Yeah. Other than that, what advice would you give folks?
Go with a friend who you know is similar to your level, or at least won't judge you if you think you'll be slower. Because I really just believe in going with a buddy. And be prepared to forgive yourself. Just open with that mindset. It's okay, you know. Size up your shoes wide, not long, but wide, because all the weight's on your back and your foot smashes down and everyone thinks it gets long. No, it also gets wide. And don't wear cotton. That's it.
Cotton kills. That's the thing I learned.
Cotton kills, yeah.
Cotton kills. Read the book to find out why, but my goodness.
Cotton kills. Cotton makes you cold.
All right, we're gonna end with this last question from AJ, who it's a really nice question because it gives us all like a goal to aim towards. What's your dream hike location that you haven't gotten to do yet? What's on your bucket list, Diana Helmuth?
I mean, this isn't gonna sound as amazing, but the Ray Lakes Loop in Kings Canyon National Park, because you can never get a permit, and then The permit season ends in September. And then for the past 4 years, it's been on fucking fire. I have been trying to hike this goddamn loop for like 5 years. And I was supposed to hike it last weekend, and then another fire started. And I'm low-key like, this thing is becoming my white whale, and I just don't know if I'm ever going to get there. But I mean, my dream hike location is anything in the Sierra Nevada in California, because that's where I'm from. I know the West Coast better. I should do more exploring of Appalachia, the Continental Divide, the Rockies. But like when you get above 8,000 feet and the air just gets really clean, and all the rocks are that cool granite, and there's all this sage everywhere, and there's not really very many bugs. If you go at the right season, there's no mosquitoes. It is extremely surreal and magical. And I've taken a few men there, and whenever they go, they're like, this is just like Skyrim. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. But I hear it's just like Skyrim. It is like being in your own fantasy movie. There's just something really magical about being up there. And partially because I think you have to earn it. Like, you have to acclimate. You're kind of not feeling great the first day or two. And you're usually you had to hike to get there, so you're full of endorphins, but there's something just really, really magical about that elevation in California. It's a whole other universe. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're gonna get you to where you want to go. I believe in this.
Next year, we're gonna try.
Next year, it won't be on fire.
Yep.
I want to thank everyone who came to this event.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, let me hand it back over to Sam.
Hi again, everybody. Thank you so much, Diana and Joanna. This was an awesome conversation. It was just delightful to listen to you both talk, and thanks everyone for joining us. Mike put a link in the chat. You can definitely order Diana's book from A Great Good Place for Books. We are a small independent bookstore in Montclair Village in Oakland. And we'd love to help you get your hands on this wonderful, funny, informative, amazing book, How to Suffer Outside. And again, it's so funny, as you can tell from just the funniness of this call. That's it. Thank you again. And just wishing everyone a great night, and get out there and do some hiking.
Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it, especially the Storm listeners. I see you guys, and I'm just like, I'm so honored you guys came. Thank you.
Bye.
Wonderful. Good night, everybody.